All right, what's up? I am super excited to be doing today's stream. It is RTN season and ProQuest. I kind of like lump them together into kind of the same thing. It's just my favorite time in Flesh and Blood. We have people that, you know, are busy, don't play the game as much. I feel like they make a big effort to really attend these events. So there's a lot of people that get to play competitively that don't get to have the opportunity to travel to like callings and pro tours and stuff like that. So, um, you know, I love driving 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever the case may be, and seeing all the friendly faces. For me personally, it's in like the Huntsville area, Atlanta, places like that, and just seeing the friendly faces, the people that you see at all these events, reoccurring. You get to know them. You check in on them. It's just all around a good time. The games are competitive, but they're not. Me personally, I've never been in an RTN and somebody being like, "Oh, you didn't tick up tunic fast enough. You can't you can't like have it back or what." It's like relaxed, but it's competitive. Some of the best banter I've ever had was during RTN season. I just love this season specifically. People are excited to go to nationals. It's not too cutthroat like ProQuest is because top four make it to get an invite to nationals. So toward the end of the season, you get a lot of situations where people are like, "Oh, we already have our invite," and kind of, it's just really relaxed, which I really, even as a competitive player and somebody who goes to all of the callings and pro tours and worlds and all of that, it's something that I truly enjoy and truly cherish. It's my favorite time of the year. Period. I absolutely love it. With that being said, the goal that I wanted to basically accomplish with today's stream was simply dedicate a stream to explain to people what to expect at the RTN season. I'm not talking about like how they're going to pair rounds. I'm talking like meta stuff, right? Like be ready for this deck. What are some tools you can utilize to be ready for said deck? That's the type of stuff I want to cover today. With that being said, also, if you have any questions, I don't care what it is, throw it in chat. Not necessarily right now, but give me like 10 minutes or so, and I would love to answer those questions. It could be, I'm torn between these two sideboard cards, or everybody and their mama is playing illusionist in my area. What do I need to bring? Kind of, whatever, because I can't give one answer for RTN season and it be the perfect answer for everybody, because there are a lot of stipulations and situations where the metas can be very localized. People stick to their preference, stuff like that. How do I beat Prism Kano? Well, you don't, Justin. That is the answer. I wish there was another way or something else I could tell you, but the answer is you just do not, until they change how everything Spectra works. So, with that being said, we got RTN season coming up. I'm going to, I think, one this weekend. I have the opportunity to go to two, but I really just want to be one and done, which historically has happened. Last season was the exception. Last season it took a little longer than anticipated, but it is what it is. And so yeah, I just wanted to dedicate one stream to try and help people as much as I possibly can going into the season. Because, I want everybody to do as good as they possibly can, be ready, have a good time, and maybe see you at nationals, right? That's the goal, of course. For those of you who don't know, I believe they are not doing XP invites for nationals this year. So if that was something that you did lean on, try not to. because they are no longer doing that. So yeah, it's top 70. No. I don't know if they're doing the ELO after it's combined for nationals or they're doing it before. I'm not entirely sure. We can go over some draft stuff too, Justin. I have no problem doing that. Which one am I heading to? This weekend, I'm going to Gamers Guild in Jasper, Alabama, of course. And then I have a couple more in like Mississippi and Atlanta. So we're doing a bit of driving over the next few weeks. But if it's to play Flesh and Blood, I'm always down for it. Also, news: the first week of the ArcLight Invitational Tournament has officially been posted. After the stream, feel free to go check it out. I ended up playing my match against Alexander Vore, an amazing player, top 8 the most recent calling, one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. And yeah, just all around really good player. We got to play a game against, I was playing KO, he was playing Dash, and the game probably doesn't end the way you think it would. But it was a smashing performance on my end, I do have to say. So, so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Let me get a drink of water real quick. All right, so we'll do CC first, and then we'll do draft, because I don't know if everybody else's area is the same as mine. There's about a 4-to-1 ratio. So for every 4 CC events in my local area, there's about 1 draft. So I'm going to try and hit the most relevant thing first and go from there. Hang on 1 sec. Okay, sorry about that, chat. So over under on how many gold fulls I pick up this season. Setting it 2. I mean, you crush it pretty much every season, right? Guardian hasn't gotten any worse. I got to go over on that one. Or actually, you know what? I'm gonna say at. I'm gonna say at 2. That's what I'm gonna guess. Should I play D-Rat Kano or normal combo Kano? I would edge toward normal combo, me personally. But all right, so let's talk about the meta. Now, I heard everybody loves tier lists. So what I did was I went ahead and I made not like a meta tier list, but like I think during RTN season, it's very important to bring something that just does something super well, something with like a linear strategy. When you think linear strategy, you probably think Phi, Dromai to a certain extent. It just does something that forces other people to have an answer to. But it's just going to do its one thing that it does very well. And so I made a tier list that incorporated that more so than what I just think is the best deck, right? So this is not something, I would not take this tier list I'm about to show and say, oh, I'm bringing this to Pro Tour. Like, don't do that. I'm saying at an RTN level, and it's also factoring in like skill level and like stuff like that. So let's go ahead and show that. So this is what we are looking at. And it's somewhat similar to the one that we did predicting the season, or just where the meta stood, right? I had Prism in A tier, I had Kano in A tier, and yeah, I had Dromai a little bit higher and things like that. And I had Dash way higher on my actual performance tier list. The reason that I have these decks up here, right? Does something powerful, have to have an answer. Same, 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 right? They have very linear strategies. If you think a lot of people are like looking into Yuki's list, the reason I have Azuri so high is because I think Azuri is a great counter for KO. You can put in, if you think there'll be a lot of KO at your RTN, play Azuri and put in Humble, and you will humble them very, very quickly. Because if they don't have a hero ability, none of their cards are sixes, which means their deck doesn't do anything. Basically, anytime you hit them with a Humble, they basically have to 2-card swing every single time, unless they get super lucky. But yeah. Kasai does something that's fundamentally powerful. She has the ability to grind games and just get a lot of value over a long period and close a game out with blood on her hands. Dromai, of course. The reason I have Dromai a lot lower than I did as like the actual tier list of the meta is because I think there's going to be an overabundance of Brute. And if you're not very, very experienced in that matchup, it can be rough. If you know what you're doing, it's actually very manageable. So that's why I placed Dromai a little bit lower. I do still think that she's a perfectly good deck. I'm just placing here based off of the hill that you would have to climb at your average RTN to actually reap the, the benefits of bringing that deck. Bolton, same thing. I think a lot of people will be unprepared into it. So I think you get a lot of free points just showing up with a deck that a lot of people don't have a lot of reps into. Same thing for Prism. I think Prism is a great deck. However, a lot of players have picked it up since it recently won the Battle Harden, and they're like trying things, right? It's one of those decks where to get the maximum amount of value from the deck, you have to, one, pilot it perfectly, which is very difficult. But I think it's one of those decks where you get a lot of edge if you can correctly guess how familiar your opponent is with the matchup, right? So if you know you can, like if they target attack your Angel and, they still have a full grip and you bring out Ravages and blow up your own Angel and turn off their turn, if you can make plays like that, then it's a fantastic deck. But you kind of have to play in a way to where you can get away with that kind of stuff against your opponent, or you're not going to make an optimal line. So it's very difficult. Minimal Phi helps Dromai out for sure. That as well. Metashare, we will go over that too. Absolutely. And I'm almost a little worried about playing into Prism. So 90% of unless you have like somebody that's been on Prism for a while, I wouldn't sweat it too much, Michael, because like I said, it's a very difficult deck to play. And if they picked it up because it won the Battle Harden, chances are, unless they're just like a top tier player, they're not going to do very well, I would guess. So I wouldn't be too worried about Prism in RTN season. I think it'll have a very, very low meta representation. Okay, so those two are the ones that need to be talked about the most, was Prism and KO, because they've won the two most recent tournaments that are classic constructed in our meta. And his team are my locals. Okay, well then, Ben, you would have something to worry about. You would have to respect it. But Ben, I think there's a lot of edge to be gained if you know what you're doing into the deck. There's a video that somebody posted, and the intro to the video, I wish I had it. It was somewhere on Twitter, but they said it was the greatest Prism video you'll ever watch, and they were 100% correct. And they literally went over all the like sneaky lines of Prism, like the Ravages play when they, attack into your Herald, you bring out Ravages with Halo, and then shoot yourself with the Arcane to pop the ward on the Angel they're attacking, which dissolves their attack, which means they don't have go again. If you know all that stuff, the matchup becomes a lot easier. So, Ben, I think there's a lot of edge to be gained in that matchup specifically. I would give it a few reps, but I think it's easily obtainable. But you would have to respect it if Rob and them are your locals. That's just how it is. What are the most represented decks in? It's hard to predict this because it's very localized, right? But from a large scale, right? Like I think ever since Lexi's been super dominant, I don't think LSS has actually published the Road to Nationals and ProQuest numbers. I could be mistaken, but I don't think I've seen a graph, like a pie chart, showing hero representation for quite some time from the company. I don't know if that's on purpose, because they didn't want to throw up a pie chart that was 70% Lexi. I'm not entirely sure. They showed all the wins, but I don't believe they showed meta representation. So what I can predict, or what I can attempt to predict, is the overarching meta representation. Like if you averaged all the RTNs in the world, right? I can do that. I can't say Victor's going to be highly represented and then nobody brings Victor to your RTN because it's 20 people and just nobody likes Guardian there, right? Like I can't do that. What I can say, I can give you the average perception of the meta from a macro perspective. And that would be, I would expect a ton of Bravo, KO, Kasai as kind of your top three, with Dory and Levia and Victor coming in probably second. And then you start having your answers come in, like Azalea, Dromai, maybe Dash, Phi, something like that, is kind of what I would put it at as far as like a meta representation. So top three represented decks, I would personally have to say, which I think it's safe to say KO, Bravo, Kasai. Then in the next tier, maybe like, Dromai, Victor, Levia, and maybe Dory, like I said. And then the following after that would be like all the answers like Bolton, Azalea, stuff like that. My 4-man group traveling to Louisville this weekend and is Tukasai, Dory, and Victor. See, I hit the nail on the head. Like, those are just decks that present a question and you have to have an answer to it, right? I think those are solid choices. Dory less so. I think Dory is kind of forced in a spot to where she is going to have to answer those questions, but she has a lot of tools to do so. What does Phi answer other than Dromai? That's a great question. So Phi is going to answer KO a little bit. You're going to get dumpstered by Victor. You're going to be 50-50 into Bravo. I don't think the Azalea matchup is as bad as people make it out to be if you run Pouncing Links. But I think you can give KO a hard time. If you're unprepared, this matchup is horrendous, and so is the Bolton one, if you're underprepared. If you're prepared, it can be a lot better. Other than that, like, that's really all you're answering is like kind of just KO. And it's not even like, maybe even Levia. You could probably beat average Levias pretty easily with Phi. But if they're really good at Levia, you're probably not going to do that great. So really, you're just answering the brutes with Phi. That's the answer to that question. You're answering the brutes with Phi. You're putting yourself at risk against Victor. And if you're not familiar with the Bravo matchup, you'll get dumpstered. But if you're good, should be solid. I see 138 draft, 292, so about 1/3. Okay. In our area, I was seeing like like a 1-to-4 ratio, but 1-to-3 makes perfect sense. Seeing my 2 heroes in F tier hurts. Poor choice of power. So I'm just guessing that one of those is probably Max. I think Max is I had him in A tier for, my actual like power level deck. However, bringing him to RTN season with all the brutes going around, I think you're just asking to lose, which is why I have him so low. I think Max is actually a pretty decent deck, but I think the RTN meta is just something that's, I don't know. I would be very skeptical to bring Max to an RTN because you just lose to certain cards, and if people bring those cards, you're just done. What does being prepared against Kasai and Bolton look like as Fi? Yeah, no worries. So it's blocking patterns, right? So you have to know like to save your armor for Spoils of War, right? Or save your armor for the Lumina. It could be certain tech choices like running a little bit more non-attacks instead of all attacks. Anything along those lines. I would say the most important edge that you can actually gain in those two matchups as Fi would be just understanding the matchup and knowing what they are trying to accomplish, right? If you shut down the Spoils of War the best you can, then, or maybe you don't shut down the Spoils of War, but you make sure that you bring the life totals down low enough to where you're getting every single card to render the copper useless. You have to kind of like know the win cons. Bring back Rosetta Thorn. I wish. Fi is a skill choice. Pulling a 6-attack chain each turn will force blocks to prevent a mass trigger. Yeah, so Mask of Momentum, I think, is probably the worst it's ever been. There's so much armor in the format right now that it seems very, very risky. So be cognizant of that. All right, good to hear Max is not a terrible deck at all. I would not bring him to it. I think he's bad for RTN season. The ALS loop for Prism, 100%. You have to be familiar with that, how it happens. If you have a convenient way to gain an action point, like scabs, you can shut that down, though. It just depends. So I actually have Arachne higher than... I do agree that Arachne is actually better than he looks. I think like for RTN season, he's probably actually like C tier because he answers a lot of the decks. My main thing is why gamble that when you can play Azuri and have like a really, really good win rate into KO, right? Because both of you are still losing to Dromai 100%, right? So the only reason that I have Arachne in the D tier, I do agree with you, it is the same symptom of like why play that assassin, right? That blue card is amazing. It's amazing, but I think that Azuri's matchup into KO specifically just makes it a better bring to RTN season. Simple as that. But I do 100% agree with you. I think Arachne is much better than he is led on to be. 100% agree. I just think that Azuri is better. Simple as that. Momentum. Yeah, there's just too much armor in the... there's way too much armor in the format to where it's going to be way too late in the game before you actually realize the value on momentum. If you ever do, is kind of the question. Because there's so much armor in the format right now. Look at these heroes, right? All 5 of these heroes at the top, with the exception of Azalea, have 10 armor or higher, right? Bravo has, 13 or so. So does Levi has more with Husk. He has, 6, 7, plus 2, 9 on KO. And then even more, like 11 for Victor. Like, the armor in this top category is insane. You're never going to hit 3 times in a row. It's not going to happen. Just isn't. This is the only deck that Mask of Momentum is probably relevant into right now. It just is what it is. Same thing for the Warriors. A lot of armor. Your armor doesn't drop off till about here. That's where your armor drops off. Funny how it works that way. Everybody that has a bunch of armor is at the top. Weird. Mask of Momentum being in such a bad spot, do you think that would warrant a dedicated Emberblade list? It could. It could be the time to abandon Kodachis. That's just something you would have to test. I would lean toward yes. So we went over the meta representation, kind of we also went over the tier list of like things to bring to Artean season. Once again, this is not a tier list that represents what I think the best decks in the format are. That is not what this is. This is a tier list that basically says if you bring this hero to Artean season, you get more value just by bringing this hero. And then vice versa. If you bring this hero, you get much less value by just bringing that hero. It's kind of like everybody's trying to get to the end zone, and this is starting on the 50-yard line. This is starting on the 40, the 30, the 20, and the 10 is the best way to look at it, right? I'm not saying that it's the best. I'm just saying that these guys are just starting at halfway across the field is what I'm saying. And then we went over meta representation as well, what we're really expecting. Yeah, I wouldn't run Kodachi Find currently. I absolutely love that deck. Also feel that the new card just make Katsu better Link's Burst deck. It could be. Am I throwing my chances? What is it? The crazy. I don't know if anybody has caught it yet, but Tekla Volson is actually way higher than Vincent. And this is due to absolutely nobody except Nick in the Discord. Tekla Volson can target very specific decks. And if you know those decks will be at your RTN, it's a great pick. The problem is you're going to lose like 2 to 3 rogue matchups on the way there, right? But if you know your area well enough, I see a situation where it actually would make sense to bring Tekla Volson. I cannot say the same thing about Vincent. You could not build me a situation. Pick one of these heroes, right? Any one of these heroes. And other than Prism. And say, if you could force 50% of the RTN to bring that hero, then Vincent would still be a bad bring, right? Like, what would you... Bravo's going to dumpster you. So is Azalea. So is KO. So is Levias. So is Victor's really going to dumpster you. Kasai, I mean, all these heroes, you couldn't pick one other than maybe Viserai that you were like, okay, I'm going to force everybody to play this hero, and now I have a chance. Like, I just don't see it. I mean, I want it to be good. I mean, I'm wearing the damn shirt, right? Like, I want Vincent to be good, but it just isn't there. I hate to say it. Prism should be in every tier, entirely dependent on number of reps with the deck where it should be. I 100% agree. The reason that I think that her actual power level, I put her in A tier in my initial, this is how the deck will perform in the meta overall. I dropped her in this one because I think that people are not going to know how to pilot her. They're not going to make the correct sideboarding decisions. They're not going to know all the trick plays that you can do, and they're not going to know whether the opponent knows about all the trick plays you can do and play around that accordingly. So I 100% agree. Remember to consider your local meta as well. It might be all is opposite. Yeah, I caveated that at the very beginning, and that's why I wanted to bring everyone in here and ask questions specifically for their situation. And when I basically summarized what I thought the meta representation was, I specifically mentioned that I could possibly predict it from a macro level, not on a local level. That's impossible. I've seen local metas where everybody absolutely refuses to play Illusionist because nobody likes it, right? And I've been in metas where that's all they play. You just can't predict that kind of stuff. As a fellow baller, yes, Vincent just isn't in a great spot. I agree. Could you explain in more detail why Levi is a good pick for RTN season? Is it because of carrying Husk, the attack cards, or why not Rhinar? Okay, that's a fantastic question. I'll answer it right now. Rhinar, only his toolkit. At the very beginning of the stream, I said people going to RTN should bring decks that ask questions, not decks that answer questions. Rhinar answers fatigue. He doesn't ask anything, right? Whereas Levi says, I'm going to throw big, efficient attacks. You can attempt to fatigue me if you want, but if I know how to handle that situation, I'm going to win. And if you try to race me, I have all the armor in the world. I have efficient attacks, and I'm just going to get there, right? Most of the time. So Levi does something that's very linear. It's very powerful. It's kind of hard to execute, I'll admit that. But it does something that's fundamentally powerful. And that's why I have her in the A tier. Rhinar does do some cool things, right? But if you take away Blood Rush Bellow, nothing that he does is just fundamentally powerful. Intimidate is great, but Intimidate only works if the deck is actually trying to engage in a mid-range plan. Some of these decks do, some of the decks don't. I think Rhinar is an okay deck, just I wouldn't bring him over the other two brutes. I hope that answered your question. I will say Victor and Azalea being top tier gives some reason to run Arachne over Azuri. That is possible, but I think Azuri is good into Azalea already. Could be mistaken there. It feels okay anyway. You could have a full field of Vincent and you'd still probably be under. You could have a whole bunch of Vincent mirrors and she would still be bad. Do you think Kasai needs / would like any tech into specific matchups, or do you think her value game plan is good enough into most / all of the field? I think Kasai is one of those decks where there's some decks in Flesh and Blood where your sideboard space can be utilized to answer things or just change your game plan. I think Kasai's sideboard should be like Raise an Army, stuff like that just changes her game plan. Not necessary. I don't think there's room in there to like start throwing stuff in to specifically target certain decks. Maybe some D-reacts, stuff like that. She's probably already running a few, but maybe like that's all you got, something like that could be more than enough. Maybe some cards to hedge against Victor is probably the most. How do you feel about Kasai into Brutes and Guardian? I think Kasai is fine into Brute. Guardian, it depends. If the Guardian player is very good, it can be a little iffy. But at its highest level on both ends, I would say it's a close matchup. Oh, so the heroes in C tier and below are really answering questions without asking. That's 100%. You nailed it in one sentence. It's as simple as that, right? Like you're bringing Teklevossen to beat up on Guardian, right? Because that's like one of the freest matches you'll ever play in Flesh and Blood. But you're not beating really anything else, right? Same thing for Arachne. You might be trying to pick on a couple decks, right? Same thing with with Dash, you might try to like single out some aggro decks. You know, that's all of these decks are just trying to answer certain questions. Now, I will say that if you know, like, if all of your area is in a Discord, right, and everybody's sharing what they're bringing and stuff like that, and maybe you just have that community and everybody's just trying to like have a good time or whatever, and like somehow you have the information that 12 of 15 players are going to be on Guardian, bring the D tier hero, bring Teklavos, and you'll just win, right? That's kind of the idea. Take It on the Chin has found its way into my Kasai list. I think Take It on the Chin's fantastic. I really value the extra damage prevention. Yeah, and then off of the blue, you can go swing, but you can also either Grains or Iron Song Versus, whichever one you're running. But pretty much 90% of the time in that situation, if you're playing against a deck that has a lot of attacks, you would probably Grains, if I had to guess, because I guess you could always Iron Song versus the Saber, depending. It's one of those where it depends on the matchup. But yeah, the blue fits that curve like perfect. You get the 4 value on the swings, then you get the extra with the on hit, and you get the Dynamo's replenishment. So it's really clean, block down, get your value. I feel like Riptide is broken, but no one plays him. So he isn't represented. Well, Riptide had some game in the Lexi meta, I will admit. I think Riptide was actually pretty decent into Lexi, and that was the reason to bring him. But if we look at this meta, what would you bring Riptide to combat? I think the only deck in the top 2 tiers that Riptide actively like targets is Azalea. Because like you can just have like the best Buzzsaw trap on the planet, right? But that's it. Everybody else, like, you're not targeting any of those. Can you build a version of Riptide that's good into Ninja? Sure. But there's not going to be that much Ninja. Shouldn't be. Just doesn't target stuff. Like, simple as, or, I mean, it does target stuff. It's just not a lot, and it's not what you want to be targeting. Riptide is not a bad deck. He does some powerful stuff. There's just nothing out. Riptide is one of those decks where if a deck becomes 30-40% of the meta share and Riptide has the shot to be good at it, we'll see him show up. Also, since you brought up Raise an Army, what do you actually value that card at in the sideboard? So, yeah, you definitely run it in the sideboard. But yeah, you have to look at your deck and look at your gold generation and make a personal decision on whether you think it's worth it. But if you have enough, it's a two-edged sword, right? You have to look at your gold generation and then cards that actively use gold. So if you're running like 3 cash in and a bunch of other stuff that actively uses gold, or you see yourself using gold to swing swords and stuff like that, then maybe it's not the best card, right? It all depends on how your play style is, but I think it is important to be in the sideboard for certain game plans into certain decks. It's not something you run all the time. Kind of have a little triangle right now at the top of the meta. Yep, Brute, Guardian, Warrior. I agree. That are going to help keep one another in check, but you can't ignore any of them. I 100% agree. Can in a good amount of reps raise a hero up a tier. Can comfort in a good amount of reps raise a hero up a tier? Of course, right? If you've been playing, if you've been playing Teklavos since the 70s, you probably bring it, right? But on a serious note, like, it's not only that, right? You have to look at your personal situation. Let's say that you've played nothing but one hero for a year and a half, and that hero just happens to land somewhere in the D or F tier. You have to not only factor in the advantage you gain for bringing whatever hero it is. But you have to also factor in the disadvantage of minimal reps and sideboarding knowledge for the hero that you are bringing, right? So there's kind of like two levels of opportunity costs that you're actually paying when making that decision. Specialists always get a few points in their heroes, so maybe in some cases, maybe even a lot. But at the same time, you know, it could be a situation of starting on the 35 instead of the 30, right? When you could still just start on the 50 by bringing one of these top heroes. Riptide probably has game into warrior. Well, like Dawnblade Dory, yes, but like the other ones with like 2 weapons, I don't think so. Are your heroes in the same tier weighed left to right? A little bit. They're a little bit like best on this side, worst on this side. I didn't put too much thought in it, but I just kind of like generally. But yes, it is a little weighted to the left. Left is better, right is worse. I've used Raisin Army against slow fatigue. Yeah, that's exactly who you want to be using it against. Playing a super grindy game, only Kasai for gold, and then had a tall text for that. Yep. Made like 3 sales swords late game. Turn. Yep. I've used gold as a bit of an engine. Popping for sure. Yeah. The problem is if you do that, you won't have gold for Raisin Army, which will make Raisin Army bad card. I'm not the world's most active Riptider, but Blade Runner by itself enables every single trap in the arsenal. Yes. And then what? Ask yourself this question. If you could resolve every single trap in your deck, do you still win that game? And if you can't, without a shadow of a doubt, answer that question, yes, then it's not it. And I don't think you can. I don't think you can say if you resolved every single trap that you 100% win that game. Yep, and you said it right there in the line next to it. You said unsure if that's enough, though. So that answers the question, right? I mean, if you could execute every single trap and you still don't know if you win, it's not the play. Dory could also just choose to only swing. Yeah, exactly. You could just fatigue Riptide by just swinging Dawnblade and not giving it go again. Boom, boom, boom. You could do that with any of the warriors, right? All right, you got me there. Do you think Bravo is good enough pick now that even people without much Guardian experience should learn the deck? Chris, I love that question. Okay. Back when I played Briar, there were several times in the meta where I thought I should have pivoted to Oldhim as a deck that I brought to a tournament. And the one thing that really deterred me from bringing certain decks to or specifically Oldhim to a bigger event was I thought that I wouldn't be able to get enough reps to go against the Michael Hamiltons, and the Ben Hannons and all the great Guardian players that have been playing like all Guardian decks for like years, right? Because Guardian historically has been the least amount of variance in any matchup in Flesh and Blood, right? Because it's very grindy. It's like a game of inches, not miles. And yeah, the better player historically usually wins. And I thought I wouldn't be able to get enough reps to really push that advantage against that level of player. However, the reason that I love your question, Chris, is I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the Guardian Mirror has evolved with the inception of Tunic Bravo to where it still holds some key components of what it used to be, but you'll play a lot of Guardian Mirrors and not even make it to second cycle, right? The only time where you're forced into a second cycle situation is when one runs like Staunches and Red Unmovables and stuff like that, right? But if you're both on like the regular tunic, a little bit aggressive, there's a ton of those matches where you don't even make it to second cycle. Am I saying that that's how it should be played or that's a good enough reason to play it? Absolutely not. What I am saying is do not be scared about minimal variance in the Guardian matchup when I think it's been diluted a lot. So don't be scared of it. If there was ever a chance to hop on Guardian when you were scared of the mirror match, now is the time to do it. But what if someone has all Marvel codexes? Doesn't that make their traps deal double damage? I hate to break it to you, but it's the white border. The white border is what deals double damage. Been playing a lot of Reinar, and he seems to have a pretty good game in a lot of A and B. I agree, right? Like Reinar is really good into Kano, can be good into Dromai. I would say good into Bolton. Probably decent into Kasai. Bad, bad, bad. And decent. So it's kind of like a perfect 50-50 split. Like you're really good into some of them, you're 50-50 into some of them, and then you're bad into some of them. But yeah, maybe Reinar could easily be like up here. I could see that. Absolutely. Everyone just hop on Kano. Yeah, I know, right? From my experience on Brutes, I can really tell the level of experience of the Bravo player in planning out the win con. Yeah. As a Reinar player, you'll get a lot of free wins because the Bravo player doesn't know how to like bait out the flesh bag or stuff like that. You know, and certain lists do not allow you to really stand a good chance. Right? Like if you have things like Sigil, it makes pummel bait plays a lot easier. But if you don't run the sigils, then you have to actually represent the pummel in an efficient manner where you don't lose value to get the flesh bag. It's just a whole thing, right? So you just got to be. A lot of it has to do with deck list and knowing the matchup. Kano way too high. You're convincing people to put hate cards in. No, I put Kano. I don't know if you were here earlier, Peter, but this is not like a end all be all tier list, like what I think the power level is. This is like these decks ask a question, these decks answer questions. And I think that linear aggressive, not necessarily aggressive, but linear strategies prevail in RTN level events is kind of what I'm getting at. Don't forget about trounces in the mirror is Victor. Don't want to reduce your chances at winning clashes. Yeah, and also it's like super risky, right? I guess it's just, you want to ball out or not. I think sabers can be really rough for Bolton depending on how fast they find the combo and the aura thing. Yep. Yeah, for Reinar. I agree. Spirit of Arena is a hell of a card. I tend to agree with that. But the best thing if there's any Boltons in your area, the best thing that I can recommend is like if you know the matchup, you know what Bolton can do, what he does when he does it. I'll give you an example. For what event was it? We were in the fancy hotel. This was Worlds. This is the World Championship. I brought Bravo. And Josh brought Bolton, right? So as teammates do, we were practicing matches, right? And if you talk to anybody on who is favored between Bravo and Bolton, they would say Bolton is heavily favored. It is just how the matchup goes. However, I think me and Josh played 5 or 6 matches, and I won every single one of them because I've played the matchup so many times. I know when the Bolt of Courage is on the end. I know when to save blocks, not save blocks, because I just know the deck in and out, right? And that just allows for so much advantage against that deck specifically. So it's very important against Bolton. Getting more reps into the deck will get you way more of an advantage than any sideboard tech will. I guarantee that. If linear prevails, then 5 should be super S tier. So I understand your point, and I don't disagree. However, there's a lot of disruption up here. And what is not disruptive up here just dumpsters you on the axis of value and winning clashes. Fi is bad into Bolton Kasai historically, right? Saber's kind of a card. If you're not, this one's like 50-50. It's not, you know, it's not the worst matchup. It's not the bad. It's probably close to 50-50 Bravo versus Fi. Azalea, if you're not super experienced on Fi, know when to smell blood in the water and, you know, really push the advantage. This can be a very rough matchup. And then I think you're good into maybe the Brutes. Like that's what, and then of course Dromai, of course. But the rest you're like, and then you're probably good into Kano. But like the rest you're not great into. It's kind of like 50-50 territory. So I just don't know like what you're really taking down with Fi. The matchup against Victor is really unfair for Fi. Yeah, it is. When they test their strength and trounce and you're like, oh yeah, I got Lava Burst. And you're like, wait a second. I like get no value on this Lava Burst because they drew a card mid-attack, right? You very quickly realize how this matchup is going to go. So just understand that one. Is this stream going to be uploaded to a VOD? 100%. 100%. It will be on the channel. 100%. Nope, she got to watch it live or miss it. No, that's not the case. Not the case. Quick question. How much variance is there between S tier and F tier? I.e., if two new players choose to play Bravo and Vincent, as in know the basic rules but barely, does it change the ranking at all? That's an interesting question that I've never thought about until now. I would say that if you have a basic knowledge of the rules and nothing else, no tier list ever will provide any value to you. That's what I would tell you. Because Victor being good into Fi does not matter if you don't know that your win con is to just win on the basis of value and drawing cards, right? And you might do things like not build the deck correctly and put too many clash cards in, and then therefore not win the clash, but actually lose the clashes against Fi, right? Because all his cards are attacks. So anytime you flip over a clash card against Fi, you're actually losing the clash, giving them a benefit. So I would say that if you have a basic understanding, if I was somebody that just walked into the game, even as somebody who makes tier lists all the time, I would ignore every single one of them. Tier lists are only valid if you understand strategies, game plans, and execution. And that's only the good tier list. The shit tier lists are just, they're no value anyway. But that's the best answer I got. The matchup against Victor, yeah, we already went over that. If my area is a splash of pretty much all of the top 3 tiers, but tipping a good bit more toward Brute and Rose on Dash, who would you recommend between Fi and Kasai? If I knew Rose was in my local area, which historically plays Dash, I knew that, and Brute, I would say Fi. I would say bring Fi. I don't even think it's close. Just bring Fi and go. I would say red deck wins all the time. I've played a lot of Kasai's since the cards were programmed on Talent Star, and I'm starting to get some reps in person. But before, it's almost exclusively Fi. If that's the game, yeah, 100%. Just bring Fi. Just bring Fi. Brute's Fridge is insane, but the power of Fi into the Brutes is what you have to understand. One of the strongest things when it comes to the Brute class is their ability to leverage 3 blocks to extend the runway of the game. And what I mean by runway, I mean like length of game. The more they block, the more turns happen in the game, which means they have more time to get to cards like Blood Rush Bellow. The strength that Fi has against the Brutes is he is saying, look, whoever's playing, draw Blood Rush Bellow in 4 turns or you are dead. It's that simple. So if they draw the Blood Rush Bellow, okay, you got a game. But if they don't, you can probably beat them on the axis of value even with the armor. So Fi's greatest strength is shortening the game to keep certain decks away from their really big power cards. Let's see. Fi seems not great into Brute. I think it's fantastic into Brute. Personally. You got to be careful with the flesh bag, though. You got to be really careful. It can really get you. It can really get you. That's why anytime that I'm playing Fi into a Brute, I like to never Arsenal. And then that way, no matter what gets flesh bagged, you can always just throw it in Arsenal, right? But it's when you Arsenal and then get flesh bagged, then things can get a little awkward, right? Or can we let Victors lose to Bravo and dodge them in gym? You can. You can. Clip that amazing answer. I will try. I will try. That would actually make a good clip, probably. Brute's Fridge is so insane now. What do you think about Riptide? With all the go again plus damage running around right now, it's kind of the answer that I already gave a little bit. Is he doesn't really, the only deck that he really targets in the top 2 rows is Azalea because of Buzzsaw. All the rest of them are just, you're not really winning if they understand you don't have a weapon. Like, it's just that simple, right? If they understand that as Riptide, you do not have a weapon, I think a lot of these heroes could just win on the basis of that. What would you bring if your meta was full of Rhinar, KO, and Azalea? Okay, let's look at that. You said Rhinar, KO, and Azalea. Okay, this little section right here. Okay, so let's look at it. I would not bring Mech because it's double Brute, right? So anything Mech is out of the question. I would not bring Dromai because Dromai is like not even that good into Azalea. It's actually kind of scary sometimes. Brute, Azalea. This is tough. I would say your best shot is Azuri. Azuri is good into Azalea. It's really good into KO. It can be a little iffy against Rhinar, but it's actually not that bad. Spider Bite kind of puts in work against Rhinar because he wants to actively be blocking a lot. I think Azuri would be your best shot if that was your meta. It's not an easy deck to play. There are some things that need to be learned. I don't know if Ben Dodd has put out any resources in the Purple Discord or anything like that, or like advice. But I would try to reach out to people like that. Ben Dodd's the one that won the calling on Azuri, and just try to, find somebody that knows something about it. But that's what I would recommend. I would recommend either, if you were really good at Guardian, I could see it, because Guardian's going to do okay into Azalea if you have the right respect for Azalea. And then you can win these matches based on skill. So that's what I would recommend. Specifically Bravo, not Victor. I would bring Bravo. But my number one pick would be Azuri, and then the secondary would be Bravo. Hopefully one of those apply. Let's see. I answered that question well. He's got Riptide and F tier. So that's, I mean, yep. Link speeds up the game a turn also. 100%. 1v1. Not today, Justin. Not today. As Fi, I only want the Arsenal chain starters into Brood. Yep. Bring Azuri with a race face as a sideboard. Yeah. Like humble into KO is just it's so good. It is so good. One day you'll put Dorian B. I just know it. I put her in. Once again, this is not the actual like meta. How I think it's just like going to an RTN season. I think these decks will do better than these decks, kind of situation. I think Dory is easily B tier. I actually put her in B tier in my actual like this is the power level of all the decks. I put Dory in B tier and actually said that she could make it to A tier. So I'm already there with you. I think Dory is a solid deck right now. I just don't think she's well positioned in the RTN meta because unless you just know that she attacks the meta that will be represented because you know the local area. With our shop being the only RTN in Kentucky, I expect a full field of heroes. Plenty of people from all over the tri-state area usually show up. Yep. And that's a killer area too. You got like what is it? Merrick and Mara over in the Carolinas, Taylor. Yeah, a lot of good players in that area. That probably I don't know if they travel that far. I don't know how many people will show up, but that seems like a pretty competitive region if I had to guess. If the top three are Bravo, KO, and Kasai, isn't Kano a strong choice? He is. And the only reason that he's this low is because he requires so much skill to execute. If you're somebody like Peter or Majin, he's A tier. It's not even a question. But because of the skill that is required, once again, we're talking RTN level competitors. If your average Kano player took it to an RTN, do you think it's A tier? I don't think it is. I think he's a solid B. I think he's a solid B because he's really good into a lot of that. Why is Azalea in S tier? Because she does something that's fundamentally powerful, and you have to bring an answer. That's why. Thoughts on Bravo fatigue list right now? All right, chat, let's talk for a second. Let's talk about fatigue. I'm going to hurt some people's feelings in a second, and that's okay. Because the only thing you're ever going to get out of me is honesty. Nothing else. When you play fatigue in Flesh and Blood, let me put it like this, and I'm not dogging on anybody that plays it. I think it's a perfectly valid strategy. But you have to understand what you are doing when you present the strategy. Imagine you walk out to a track field with a 400 meter, a 400 meter track, right? For those of you who don't know, that's just one lap, big circle, whatever. And you put one hurdle on the track. Okay? Your opponent is running a lap, and you just slide out one hurdle. Okay? If they trip and fall, you win. But if in any time during the 50 minutes you give them, they figure out how to get over that one hurdle, you're going to lose. Because the only problem that you are, or game plan, or you're basically just sliding the hurdle out and saying, look, can you jump over it? Cool. If you can, I'm going to go sit my ass down, right? But if you can't, I'm going to go to the next round. That is fatigue in Flesh and Blood. It's like literally that's it. So, with that being said, if you thought for some reason that your local area, the majority of the players are not good enough to answer that question, bring it. You'll do exceptionally well. You will kill it if you bring that deck. But like we were talking earlier, where if you have an area where there's a bunch of solid players and they know how to hop over that one hurdle that you're sliding out onto the track, then you're going to get ran over. It's as simple as that. So basically, when you bring fatigue, you're planning on everybody else being bad. There, I said it. I said it. If you bring a fatigue deck in Flesh and Blood, you're just planning on everybody being bad. Or everybody making a mistake in sideboarding. Simple as that. That's what I think about the Bravo fatigue list. If you think everybody in your area is shit at the game, bring it. If not, leave that shit in the deck box. Okay. Sorry, I went on a little tangent. Somebody said fatigue and the PTSD set in. Okay. One of the 100 wolf packs. One of my favorite things in Flesh and Blood is I forget who. I think it was Flake. Took the picture of like the whole calling or whatever, and they were like, "Oh yeah, just a wolf pack team dinner." It should have me dying. Oh, it was so funny. I actually think Kasai with AB 2-3, maybe some Oasis. No, I think if the Kano is good, it should dumpster Kasai. Oh no, someone mentioned fatigue to Nathan. Scatter. Here it comes. Cody Williams spent a ton of his podcast saying Kasai can't beat Kano. I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Because they're all non-attacks, so you're not getting any of your special benefits on Hot Streak or Sabers. So the rate's a lot lower. You actively want to be blocking, which to me it feels like Bravo but instead of pummeling your Blade Fury, like that doesn't seem good. I'd love to live in an area with big scary competition. Makes you a better player. I agree. I'm really not feeling Azalea this season. Lots of Dromize, Bravos locally. Yeah, if that's your local area, 100%. Don't bring it. Going to be interesting seeing what will fit well into that. So if you have a lot of Dromize and Bravos, these decks specifically, you can't out. When you say Bravo, I immediately go to Bolton. However, Bolton sucks in a Dromine. It's so bad. So that's not a choice. I would say that if you could play it correctly, a Rhinar or Levia, or even KO, any of the brutes, I think could do solid into a Dromai/Bravo meta. The problem is, as the brutes, you're going to have to put in a lot of work in that matchup and understand, right? You have to understand the fatigue situation. You have to understand what to prioritize with Dromai and stuff like that. But I think if those are your two matchups, I would really like to bring any one of the brutes, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Bring fatigue if you don't like going to the bathroom or getting food in between rounds. I agree. So if I register Decimator Dory, Nathan's going to take it as an insult. Well, I mean, you're Josh, you're kind of planning on me not knowing how to answer that question. Now, I guess I do have to put an asterisk there and say that certain decks just don't have, like, sometimes you're sliding a hurdle in front of somebody that literally can't jump, and that's a solid problem to present to them. But most decks probably have an answer. But like Decimator Dory, like you almost have to do that against the Guardians, right? It's kind of like mandatory. It's not really even like a choice, right? Because there's so many D-reacts and so much armor, and yeah, it just, you kind of have to present that. You kind of have to. How do you beat Bravo as Azuri? If you're really good at Azuri, it should be a favorable matchup. I'm under the impression that Azuri is favored into Bravo at the highest level. However, if you're at the average level, I think it's flipped. I think it's Bravo favored. And I think it is just as the Azuri player, it is so important to understand and realize the value associated with the effect on Spider's Bite. And knowing when it matters, when it does not matter, and when to layer things. Like so much of it is very, very, very important. With that being said about fatigue, why is Victor so high? Well, that's actually a very interesting question because Victor is not a fatigue deck. Anybody that's playing Victor as a fatigue deck doesn't know how to play the deck. Anybody who thinks that Victor is fatigue doesn't know how to play against the deck. When you break down Victor, the only reason he's blocking is so he can extract more value by drawing cards. He doesn't care about the damage. He's trying to just win the turn cycle via value, right? And he does that defensively because that's how the devs designed it. But he should be throwing Spinal Crushes and Debilitates and Prime Defights and Choke Slams or whatever else flavor red attack they have, right? If you look at a good Victor deck, it's only like 33 blues, right? 36 tops. God, it can't even be 36. That sounds crazy. Probably 30 to 33 blues in a Victor deck if it's well built. I mean, that's a lot of, like, that from the get-go should say, okay, this is probably slightly aggressive, right? So I don't think Victor is a fatigue deck. Simple as that. I do not think Victor is a fatigue deck. Yep, and here comes chat. Where did the notion that Victor is a fatigue deck come from? Yeah, I think people just look at the weapon, Miller's Grindstone. If a Victor match is played correctly, they will not swing the hammer until like the end of the game. Like it's one of those things where you've reached like this end game state to where you have to block down to one card, so you're swinging hammer because that's like literally all you can do, right? So yeah, Victor's not a fatigue deck. I've been turned 1-2 pulverized by Victor so many times. That's what they should be doing. That is what they should actively be doing, is setting stuff up. Now, if you're having trouble into Victor, let me give you one piece of advice. Just block your hand in pass turn one time and see what happens. 90% of the time, they're going to swing 8 damage on 4 cards. Once you conceptualize that, you can use that to your advantage. You can say, okay, if I block 2 cards and send a little bit of damage, I get no value on the turn cycle because what little damage I'm presenting is he's going to block and draw cards. Therefore, I progress nothing. I took a little bit of damage to do nothing. But if you just block your whole hand, or block 3 cards and like play a permanent or whatever, and then if they have to pitch Test of Strength or Trounce, it's not a good card. And they can't put it in Arsenal, right? So don't let them play it. I'm not saying do that every turn. I'm just saying that if you're put in a spot where you're facing down a Spinal Crush and you're thinking about blocking 6 or 9, ask yourself, what really is the value of sending back 7 and blocking 6 and taking 3? When the chances are they're probably going to draw a card and not be able to use all of it anyway. Just a thought. All right. These are good questions. Keep them coming, chat. I'm telling you, this stream is to help everyone for the RTN season. That is all I'm streaming for. No gameplay. Sorry if anybody was expecting that. I am here just to help everybody with RTN season, answer a couple questions, get everybody's mind right on matchups, whatever. However I could be of assistance. That's what I'm here for today. Oh, and one more thing before I go back down, chat. Somebody on Twitter requested me to go over like how my KO list that I presented would do in the RTN season, and would there be any changes? Those of you who don't know, let me get everybody caught up. I ran a much more aggressive version of KO than Yuki did. I ran the yellow versions of Wild Ride and Pulping, whereas Yuki did not. And mine was very heavily focused on, just go, value-oriented on an aggressive axis. With that being said, if I was going into an RTN meta where there was going to be a lot of decks that played Disruption, like Bravo, Azalea, stuff like that, I would probably lean away from my version and lean more towards Yuki's version. The more mid-rangey, less no blocks, stuff like that. If there's less disruption and people are playing decks like Victor and, stuff like that, then I would say, or other brutes, I would say, yeah, just play the more aggressive leaning KO. That's the best recommendation that I can make. So whoever asked that on Twitter, there you go. Hope it helps. Okay, let's get caught back up in chat. Any tips on playing Bravo's hard matchups? I would love to answer that question. Please say what matchups specifically. And the reason I say that, I'm not trying to sound like an asshole or anything, but like what I think is a bad matchup for Bravo might be different than what you think is a hard matchup for Bravo. Some people think the Dromai matchup is super difficult. I find it excruciatingly easy. So I need a little bit more on that one. I would love to answer it. Block with my full grip, cast bones, feels so insane into Victor. That's exactly the plays you should be making. Know when to fold them. Wise advice. Yep, that's exactly. How many D-Racks do you think are necessary to bring into matchups like Guardians, Warriors, etc.? For decks that don't normally bring them into every game? This is a great question, and it revolves around opportunity cost. Okay? Now, what do I mean by opportunity cost? So, you have to look at not what the D-React does against the opponent, right? But you also have to factor in what it does against your game plan. Let's say you have like a Fi deck that is siding out like aggressive cards and putting in that D-React. You have to ask yourself, is that D-React providing more value than taking out, because if you're still trying to be aggressive in that matchup and you draw a sync blow while you have full tempo, it's gonna suck, right? But if it's one of those matchups where it's very hard to obtain full tempo, then sync blow can be amazing. So that's the best thing that that I recommend. It's the best thing that I recommend is just understand not only what you're gaining by putting in those defensive options and those sideboard pieces, whatever you want to call them, but understand what you are losing in doing so as well. Thoughts on draft? I'm gonna hit draft in about 15 minutes. I'm gonna share with you everything I know about draft. In about 15, 20 minutes, we'll go over draft a little bit. I'm gonna finish these questions because I think they're all centered around Classic Constructed. So John said draft talk, how to best figure out your lane, I think is one topic of interest. Absolutely. How do you feel controlled dash fares into decks like Bravo and Azalea? They're really good into those decks, but they're going to struggle into the brutes because of smashing performance. But yes, controlled dash does do well into Bravo and Azalea. Yeah, so that one person who said that, I don't think they use that combination, but yes, you're going to struggle into the brutes, but yeah, I think it's a viable option as well. Balance of Justice is an amazing headpiece. If you're not giving up too much opportunity cost to run it, I think it's a great include against decks that run Art of War, Blood Rush Bellow, whatever, you name it. Bit related to the 5 thing before, how do you keep a good mental playing aggressive strategies, specifically mirrors? I know it's not productive, but I find myself blaming luck and getting tilted. So when I played aggressive decks, like very linear aggressive, like red deck wins kind of deck, right? What I found myself was I was doing the same thing. I was like, oh, I didn't go second, I lost, right? But I would review my gameplay and kind of like learn that the matchup really comes down, most of those matchups come down to who forced who to block with their cards first, okay? And knowing that information and knowing like what your throughput is given your opponent's life total. Like, let's give an example. Let's say that your opponent's on like 13 and your hand does like 12 damage but also blocks 12, right? Well, it would make no sense to drop to 1 life to present 12 damage while they're at 13, because then they're going to be able to keep every single card and they're going to kill you while you're at 1 because they're going to take your entire hand. That exchange will lose you the game 100% of the time. What you could do is block 6, send 6, somewhere in that middle ground, if the cards allow you to. And basically rely on the heart of the cards, if you will, right? Like maybe you draw a better hand than your opponent and you can make up the difference in that situation. But if you ever put them to 1 while you're at 1, you're losing the game. If you can never drop to a super low life total without taking cards from their hand. If you do that, you'll lose every time. And so I found that understanding that process and trying to manipulate the game state was the best edge I could gain in those matchups. Okay, so you're giving me information on the bad matchups for Bravo, specifically Bolton and Kadachi's for me. Okay, so I mentioned Bolton a little bit earlier. I think it is strictly experience. I think you have to know the play pattern, knowing what to do. If you're really struggling into Bolton, you can try to include more non-attack actions, like maybe you're not running Warmonger's Diplomacy, stuff like that. Anytime you add that, it's like a card you can block with that doesn't give them agency to gain go again, right? So it could be a sideboarding adjustment, and I think it's just strict knowledge. It is just knowledge. Kodachi's, I think the arm piece is really going to help you. Basically, what it allows you to do is if they ever go Kodachi, you can disrespect it, block even on the third attack with a card and the arm piece. And then if they Ancestral Empowerment or Art of War, it prevents the +1, which means they don't get that mass draw. So I think the arm piece is really going to help you as well. But it's also just knowing attack patterns. Both of those matchups are you just have to know what they can do. And that's half the battle. I think Bolton's an amazing pick. That's why he's so high. And but it does require a little bit of expertise. Because playing Bolton, you get put in situations that are very different than like a lot of other decks. And you really have to be in those situations to be able to handle them accordingly. Bravo's so easy. I love him. He is very easy to play, I will admit. Probably missed your reasoning on Azalea, but do you think Prism shares and Dromai shares hurt the deck at all? I don't think Azalea is that bad into Dromai. I think Prism is a horrendous matchup for Azalea, but I don't think there's going to be that much representation for Prism. I think it's a very hard deck to learn. It wasn't even on people's radar until it won the Battle Harden, and they have not had enough time to learn that deck. So maybe I would worry about Prism a little bit the last week or two of RTN season. I could see that being the case. Bolton actually gets countered by Towering Titan Yellow. Gonna hard disagree with that, but sure. Oh, man. What would you bias towards in a meta that's fairly evenly split between Dory, Bravo, and Katsu? With a few rogue Kano players. Ugh. So, before I read the Kano word, Dory, Bravo, and Katsu, I kind of said, okay, some like slow, control-y kind of matchup. Or deck, like Slapdash or something along those lines would probably fare pretty well into that type of meta. However, those decks do pretty bad into Kano. However, it's quite the predicament that you're in because Kano is going to counter most of the stuff that answers Bravo, Katsu, and Dory. So, unfortunately, I think you're going to have to just take a L on one of them. I don't think there's one deck that really, let's see, Dory, Bravo, Katsu. Your best shot would be Levia, but man, you got to know how to play that deck. If you don't already know it, if you don't already have some reps on it, I could not recommend it. Other than that, Rhinar, good into Kano. Can be good into Bravo if you know it. Katsu could be a little rough, but once again, if Katsu's blocked, sometimes he can just dirtle around. And Rhinar is favorable into Dory. So I would say Rhinar or give up the Kano matchup and play something controlling. That's the best advice I can give you. Everyone has 2 or 3 hard matchups and just loses. Yep. Part of Fab. I agree. Is Hold the Line worth it? I've been experimenting with it. I do not think it's better over Sync or Fate. I always thought if the card blocked 3, it's amazing. But at blocking 2, there's so few decks in the format. They're perfectly okay with arsenaling a Hold the Line and waiting endlessly until your opponent draws 2 cards. Rhinar is the only thing that really comes to mind that really is that or maybe Slapdash where it's cohesive with the game plan. Everybody what deck is okay with locking up that arsenal for 4 turns, waiting for something to happen? Balance of Justice is amazing because it's sitting on the board. I'm not sold on Hold the Line, but if you're, I hate to say this, but if your deck just isn't doing a whole lot most of the time, it's probably a good card. I think with Art of War, they could respond to the Gauntlet's trigger and then gain +1. They could with Art of War, but they could not. You're 100% correct, Chris. They could respond to the Gauntlet trigger. Yes. So it would play around Breaking Scales and Ancestral Empowerment, not Art of War. Alexander Vore is one of my locals. Always have respect for Kano. I agree. And Alex is a great player too. Yeah, that was unfortunately my read as well. Appreciate it. Absolutely. Do you have any recommendations on where to look if I want to know exactly what headpiece and Art of War / D-React sideboard package I bring into each matchup as Fi? The Runaways put out a video. Obviously, it's not going to be card for card because it's completely different meta. But look up from about 2 years ago. Dan Rakowski put out a top 4, top 8 worlds Fi video, like deck tech video. And they had it designed where they had like one package where it was like, we're going in. And then this package was, they're probably disruptive, need to do a lot more 2-card hands, kind of sideboarding, and adopt something like that. What is your opinion on whether an open meta is good / bad for the game? I think this is a great question because I saw somebody on Twitter, I don't remember who it was, unfortunately, but they said something along the lines of, how could anybody say this meta is bad when it's the most open we've ever seen? And I don't agree with that notion. I think that there are a lot of positives when the meta is open. I hated the Lexi situation. I hated the Starvo situation. Well, Starvo wasn't so bad, but like, the Lexi and the Oldham Ice in general situation. I wasn't a fan. The problem is, if the meta becomes too wide open because there is like literally no best deck, then I hate to say it, but it basically means that your tournament agency can literally go down to gym roulette. Now, if you're a casual player, it's the best thing on the planet because it's something new every time. It's fresh matchups. You're not playing the same damn deck every single time. But at like very high level competitive play, like absolutely open meta is actually not amazing. It's personal preference. Me personally, I like for there to be a best deck or two and not just like wide open. But I it's somewhere in between is like that sweet spot. I hope that answers your question. Any suggestions for Hatchet's Dory? It's my hardest matchup as Reinhardt besides Majin Bey's Kanan. Well, Hatchet's Dory, I love Hatchet's Dory. Okay? Absolutely love it. The best thing that you can do is understand when. Well, if you're Reinhardt, you just need to be intimidating a lot because Hatchet Dory actively wants to block most turns. And if you can take the correct card, you can really mess him up. You need to shorten the game more than make it long because they have dynamos. So I think as a Rhinar, you need to play a way more aggressive strategy into that deck. I hope that helps. Sucks if you're going to PT. Yep. Play Belittle just like Dan. Yeah, like I said, it's not the same cards, but the way they did the sideboarding, I think still applies. You have like an aggressive package and a mid-range package, and you just plug whichever one in. Okay, so ideas would still hold up. I learned most of turn advanced stuff. Yep. Yeah, I think it's the Runaways channel. The Runaways YouTube is where that video was. It's old video. It's old video. Back when Belittle was legal. People just seem to complain both ways. It's either too open or just a single. Yeah, I mean, it's of course it's so hard to, create the perfect environment. I'm not saying that it's bad or good that we have an open meta. I'm just telling you the downsides of both ends, right? Being open generally appeals to more casual players, and more defined metas, aka having a best deck or a couple best decks, is more appealing to high-level competitive players. Just is what it is. This do be pretty wide. Yeah. 4 to 6 top decks is a wide meta. That is very wide. I would say that like a triangle meta is like that sweet spot, right? Like if you actually look, people that played in the Starvo meta, Starvo was absolutely ridiculous, but we had like a triangle meta and it was fun. You had Chain, Prism, and Starvo, or Viserai, Prism, and Starvo. And then eventually when the Skeleton got banned, Chain took Viserai's spot. But like it was an entertaining meta because it was like, who did you want to lose to? Who did you want to lose to by how much kind of situation? And there was like a lot of play that you could make, but it was somewhat still predictable, and it was very, very fun. I like the meta right now. It's pretty diverse. It's very diverse, right? It is very diverse. You hit their go again, blue card, and then you ruin their turns. Yep, just intimidate away against Hatchet Story. Should be better. Kasai is my favorite deck right now, and I'm perfectly happy with B tier. Well, I think she is a phenomenal deck. That's why I actually have her at the top of the B tier. I think that there's just... It's very difficult. Like, it's very easy to be decent at Kasai, but I think it takes a lot of reps to kind of be at the top level when playing that deck, and that's why I can't justify putting her in A. Open meta is great for armories, but can be rough for Pro Tours. Exactly, right? Good for the more casual scene, but not so much for the competitive scene. I adore this meta as a spectator, but as a player, this meta is stressful. And that sums it up, right? You just don't know what to attack, how to attack it, anything. Chain was better than Viserai even before the ban. I don't know about that, Chief. I understand the argument. I don't know about that. If we're talking before the Seeds of Agony ban, I would agree with you. But after Seeds of Agony ban, I don't know. I don't know. Knowing what to plan your strategy around is quite helpful, but also having a wide meta so people with loads of experience can shine is nice. Well, that's the thing is like if you have a lot of experience, if the meta's super wide, you can't, like I could be the best deck builder on the planet, but if I don't know what to target or what to target by how much, my deck building skills are kind of diluted, right? Is kind of the situation that you're put in. It's an amazing problem to have. Absolutely. Wasn't the ban because Chain LL'd? Skeletor was banned. The situation where Skeletor was banned was it was like 3 weeks before Pro Tour 1. Chain was at like 900 something living legend points, and they just knocked out. The thing is, Viscerai got all of his LL points in the course of 3 months, because the combo Viscerai deck was the first time that I remember it being exposed to everyone. Was Matt Rogers at the U.S. Nationals calling that Tarek Patel won. Matt Rogers made top 8 with the Viscerai list that had the combo built into it to target Briar back before she got eroded. And so that was in September of that year. And then we had the Pro Tour that was in like March. So, but the problem was we had the holidays right there. So we had like no events. It was literally just Viscerai only had access after it was discovered for a Pro Quest season. That's it. And then it got banned, and then we had the Pro Tour about 3 weeks later, and then that's when Chain LL'd. So yeah, Nathan in chat got it right. Chain LL'd after. Okay, so the questions have seemed to have dried up. Not complaining, just is what it is. So we're gonna go ahead and go into draft now. Let's hit the draft section, okay, before we close out. Once again, if you have any questions, throw them in. But if it's not related to draft, I might get to them a little late because I don't want to like ruin what I'm talking about and stuff like that. Okay, heavy hitters draft. Okay, I'm gonna open with the cliche draft your seat, right? Everybody knows you're supposed to draft your seat in any drafting game. I'm gonna tell you a lot more than that. Okay, what I'm gonna tell you is that the general consensus that I have is a natural pod is going to have 3 brutes, 3 warriors, 2 guardian. Okay? I think if everybody reads the signal correctly, I think that's where you end up. That could easily be 4 brutes, 2 warriors, 2 guardians, or 4 warriors, 2 brutes, 2 guardians. But I think one of those 3 options is the most likely, with a 3-3-2 split being ideal. With that being said, does that mean that Guardian is worse? The answer is no. I think that the average rate on a Guardian card, the best rate you can get on a Guardian card is usually defensively. Okay? All right, I'm going to go and give the spice for drafting heavy hitters. Heavy hitters is the first format I've ever played in Flesh and Blood where sometimes the most tempo positive thing you can do is simply give it all away. Now, I know a lot of you in chat are saying, I want what Nathan is smoking because what he said makes no sense. But hear me out. We have a situation where if somebody doesn't, like, let's take a brute, right? And they don't have an agility token, right? Like they've presented their 2 for 7 or whatever, and you're thinking about blocking and you don't know what to do. If they don't have an agility token or they've given you the information where they can't create one, what are the chances that they can actively use all 4 cards on offense in an effective manner right off the top of the deck. And I'm going to tell you the chances are extremely, extremely low. Okay? So, next question you might have. Why the fuck does that matter? Well, let me explain. It's kind of the Victor situation in a different formula, where let's say they present 10 damage on their turn. Well, you have 2 choices. You can, or let's say they're doing 12. They're doing 12 because they have the agility token. Okay, and for simple math sake, let's assume that every card in your hand does 3 damage and blocks 3 damage, right? So it's worth 12 value no matter how you cut it. You have so many options as far you can block 6, you can block and send 6, you can block 9, send 3, you can block 12, send nothing. Okay? If you block 9 and send 3 and they can't utilize every card in their hand offensively, then you got absolutely no value in that exchange. You took 3 damage to take a worthless card out of their hand. You don't need a PhD to understand that that's a bad exchange. Right? So that's what I mean when I say sometimes the most positive tempo play you can make is to completely concede it. Because if we look at it this way, let's say no agility token, very few ways to leverage the entire hand. You block 12. It comes to your turn. You say, I pass. And they send 7. Right? They send like a 2 for 7 at you. You just got 5 value of tempo at absolutely no cost. Because now you can block 6, take 1, send 6. Now, of course, flesh and blood is not that easy. The math changes depending on your hand. But as you're looking at your hand, just ask yourself the question, what if I completely concede tempo in this spot and block my whole hand out? What's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? What cards have I seen in my opponent's deck, aka cracked bobble or something like that, or like a shitty blue, just a yellow performance bonus, or it's just some kind of like random shit card. And you're right, but I'm just gonna get wind up. I mean that is a risk, right? But also, if they're discarding a whole card for wind up, if they're not KO, that's a good exchange, right? They're not getting that much value, right? So that's the power of Guardian. The power of Guardian is you actually get those 12 value hands no matter whether they're offensive or defensive. And you can concede tempo, block out, and make those exchanges, right? That's the power of Guardian. The problem is if you don't get enough 3 blocks, aka why the pod can only support 2 of them, is because that deal becomes very bad if your card's blocked for 2. So the Guardians really need to struggle and get those 3 blocks as much as they possibly can. So they have the leverage to concede tempo, to get free tempo. Hope all that made sense. All that was to explain why there should be 2 Guardians in the pod. Okay. Now you have to understand, we've talked about Guardian and what they're trying to do. Now we have to analyze Brute and Warrior. Let's start with Brute. Okay, you have a couple different options as far as archetype goes, right? Everybody's favorite, Wild Ride, Bare Fangs, KO. Okay, when you're drafting cards like that don't block, you're forced into a linear strategy, which is sometimes perfectly okay. Sometimes that's the seat you're in, right? This is the situation that happened to me at the last draft at the Calling. Me and Tarek were the only Brutes in the pod. He went value-oriented Brute, and I went full aggressive Brute because he was taking the non-attack actions that like lead with speed and stuff like that that really allow you to get those maximum value plays. Now, you don't want lead with speeds if you have a bunch of wild rides, because you can draw and discard it and then not get and go again, right? So you have to understand there's two archetypes with KO. There's draft as many sixes as you can and grab the wild rides and bear fangs and then win on value. And then there's lead with speed into pack hunt. Lead with power into rawhide rumbler. Or that one cost beat chest card into some, like you're just making like those value plays, right? So you can look at what cards are left in the pack. If somebody passes you a red lead with speed, maybe you take that and stay more toward the value-oriented KO. And then same thing for Rhinar. Rhinar is just trying to do Rhinar is trying to manipulate the game state to get a Storm Strider type of effect to close the game out before its natural conclusion via Intimidate, right? You can like do a beat chest card, discarding a card, use the helmet, that's 2 intimidates, and then rawhide rumbler or something for a third, and you can easily present 12 damage. They only have 1 card in hand. You kill them from 9, right? So you're just trying to walk life totals down and then kill them unexpectedly. Is kind of the idea while you go to like 1 or 2 life. We did a practice draft for RTN on Tuesday night. 3 brutes, 4 guardian, 1 warrior. Wow. I've never seen that. So the warrior just got to buy every round. Guardians can also get good value on offense with cards like Concuss. Absolutely. But it has to be set up. When does Brute Seek go Rhinar over KO? When you don't see wild rides and stuff like that, you really can't. It's kind of like it's not how many sixes. It's a combination of how many sixes you're seeing and what sixes you are seeing. There's certain cards like Pack Hunt that can be super valuable in Rhinar. Like if you're seeing a lot of wild rides, I would be more inclined to go KO over Rhinar. If you're not seeing them, I would be more inclined to go Rhinar. What I typically like to do is I always like to start KO and get pushed into Rhinar. Is kind of how I like to approach it. Yeah, if you're a 1 of 4 for anything, it's an uphill battle. Plain and simple. It doesn't matter what you drafted. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's an uphill battle. Okay, let's talk about Warrior. I think Warrior naturally is the most powerful of the 3 classes. Not one in particular, because Kasai's pretty good though. However, because it has a unique ability to be one, it has reactions, right? Where there's no D reacts, which is I heard was pretty good. But you get to lean on weapons with your aggression, which prevents a unique opportunity to be aggressive and still have a very good fatigue tool, right? And I hate to say it, but Warrior's kind of like easy to draft. You're just trying, your priority cards like Edge Ahead and your reactions, your red reactions. You prioritize those. Draw Swords is amazing in Kasai, right? Anything that makes an agility is a super premium, right? Like, it's pretty easy to draft. I think literally like how many Edge Aheads and stuff like that is what's going to, how many wager cards is going to dictate whether you're Olympia or Kasai. I think most people will just default to Kasai, and that's probably correct. I think it's kind of you draft Kasai and you really need a reason to go into Olympia. The specialization though is really good, and it's more than enough of a reason. So just understand that. Reinar best line in common is probably a wind up. Yeah, wind up being an intimidate in Reinar is amazing, right? That's the thing. Reinar really wants those yellow 6s because they're actually 6s, where KO is drafting the blue 5s. So that's another way that you can get a good read on like who's Reinar, who's KO, stuff like that. I drafted 6 to 7 draw swords. They're pretty good. They're pretty. You just gotta make sure that you have the blue, enough blues to like actively support it. But it's really good. Yeah. So draft your seat. I think Warrior is on average the strongest. It does take a little bit more skill to play than the rest, I would say, because you have to build these scenarios where like, what if they block? What if they don't block? How do I leverage the most value out of my hand, no matter what my opponent decides to do? And yeah, headpieces, they're all bonkers. You take, I mean, Reinar one's probably the weakest, but if you are Reinar, it's amazing. Simple as that. Block 1, free intimidate, we take that. I don't think I missed anything on draft. I mean, I want to say it's overly simple, but like it really boils down to that. Know the archetypes. Also, a lot of the games, whether they're sealed or draft, token manipulation has played a way higher role than I actually thought. What do I mean by token manipulation? Well, let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say there's some of the obvious ones, right? Like when you can wager something that your opponent already has, like an agility token, right? There's no downside for them having 2 agility tokens. So anytime you can like play a wage agility while they have an agility, it's a free wager. There's no downside, right? You should do that. That's a pretty good play. Other than that, like if they have an agility token, it creates a situation where if you have disruption or you have an opportunity where you can present their life total and get cards out of their hand, do so, because it can dilute the value of the agility token if they block with more cards. So agility token is by far the easiest one or the most impactful one to play around. Just know that offensive value is more valuable while your opponent has an agility token than when it's not, right? Because they're going to be incentivized to keep their entire hand to get value from it. But in doing so means they can't block. And also, as a warrior, know that that's going to heavily influence whether they block or not, which could influence the value you extract from your hand. Okay, chat. I've been talking for a hot minute. And I've been going fast. Question. I think I've covered a lot. I'm gonna stay on for about another 5 to 10 minutes. Get any last second questions that any of you have. But we are gonna like begin the process of winding down. Also, if you're in the process of getting ready for RTN season, there is a link in the chat for Magnolia's store. They just added the heavy hitters singles. Go visit that. Great resource. Everybody knows Spencer. He's at every single event. Very dependable place to get all your singles. Check them out. Very competitive prices that will more than take care of you. Why is Max so low? Well, I think he's a great deck. I put him at A. For my like power level tier list, I think there's just a lot of brutes hanging around, and he doesn't ask a question. He's more of like a bringing an answer to the meta, and he's not answering anything in the top 2 tiers. Moving to instep. That's a great way to put it. What are you taking to RTNs? Oh, we got a spy. We got a spy in the chat. No. Right now, I'm torn between 3 picks. I'm torn between a brute, a warrior, or Bravo. Those are like the 3 most likely. I can say that I will not bring Reinar. It would, if I brought a brute, it would be Leviah or KO. If I brought a warrior, it would not be Kasai. It would be Dory or Bolton, and then I would bring Bravo as well. Bravo is kind of like, at this point, I've played him at enough events to where he's like just like a comfort pick. If I'm not confident in the other 4, I'll bring him. But yeah, if I had to bring one, it would be one of these 4. And they all happen to be in the top. I'm not just psyoping people. This is what I actually think. I truly believe in this stuff. I'm not just trying to say stuff to say stuff. Huntsville RTN on the 2nd isn't there's only 1 limited in our area, and I don't know where it's at. There's not a lot of limited events in our area. Any other cute, neat tricks like wind up discard for instant speed go again? Yeah, so you have, like they mentioned, you can discard in reactions while you claw. To gain go again, you have the instant wind up discard for intimidate in Reinar. Neat tricks. I know a lot of, so there's a lot of, how much equipment. Okay, here's a nugget. Let's say you draft 4 pieces of equipment and you play against a deck where, like, let's say you have the one that blocks if they have a vigor token, but you're playing against the one class that can't make vigor tokens, aka brutes, right? You're actively doing yourself a disservice by running that piece of armor. Now, why is that? It's just a piece of armor. What if somehow on some wage effect they get it? Yeah, well, you tell me, which one's more likely? That wild scenario plays out, or they hit you with a down and not out? Because all of that is going to play into how much equipment you have, how many tokens you have, and what your life is. If you start with lower equipment, it's harder for them to get underneath you to turn that card on. So don't bring useless pieces of equipment into the game. Also, if you have gold just sitting there, it can become a liability for the instance of down but not out. Keep that in mind. What's your reasoning for Prism / Dash IE being C tier? Prism, it's very, very difficult to play. I'm assuming that nobody has enough reps on it. I think it's actually an A tier deck. I think it's that good. However, for RTN season, there's so few players that I would actually say have the potential to take down RTNs with enough rep and experience on it. So it being in C tier is solely off of an average player bringing that deck to an RTN. For Dash IE, there's so much brute, man. Like, it's as simple as that. So much brute. So much brute right now. Is Bravo the new Briar? Not even close. Bravo is... Bravo's good, but it's so boring. It is so boring to play. It's like, oh, I don't have enough blues to play this Crippling Crush. I'll block with it. Oh, I do have enough blues. Okay, there's actually a little bit of decision. It's, you know. What heroes do you have your eyes on taking the most events? That's interesting. taking the most events, I'm going to say Guardian will take. I mean, look. You you can't disagree with me, but rude but fair. I mean, it just is what it is, you know. I get it. It's for some other people. I made Earthbriar, like I came close to the darkness, but I didn't stay there for too long. I would say Guardian or Brute probably take down the most events, but I would say that I think I don't think people fully understand how much Warrior is about to show up to these events. I think people know that people are talking about it, but I think Warrior can very easily represent 20% of anybody's RTN, and that's just something we've never seen before. There's never been a format, except for maybe Crucible of War, where there's been 20% Warrior. There's just never been. So be ready for it. Be ready for it. What would it take to get you to play Kano at an event? Okay, well, first, there would have to be 0 elo wagered at the event. That's the first requirement. Second is every other hero would have to be in Living Legend. Next question. I mean, limited by player count. I know it's CC. Oh, okay. It could be. Yeah, I think they're probably limited to 32 if I had to guess. Huntsville RTN is just building capacity for Magnolia, for what they've been told. Yep. You can even discard the windup in resolution. It's still, yeah, of course. Do you think Victor has better matchups into this meta than Bravo? I wouldn't say better. I would say different, right? So like Bravo's good into Azalea. I think Victor is horrible into Azalea because you don't have D-reacts, right? You have block cards. And that really doesn't really help you against Dominate. I think the disruption of Bravo is better into the Brutes, but Victor picks on the ninjas and the warriors better. So it's not which one's better. It's what do you want to be better into and go with that. Correct. Oh man. What would it take to play? Yeah, there have to be no elo and all other heroes LL. That's when I'll play Kano. Which reason ranks higher? Elo or LL heroes? Probably Elo, I guess. Redline Azuri seems to be a rough pick into 4 of the 5. Yeah, I don't think you can go Redline. I think you have to do like the slow, value-oriented, and you just have to give up the Dromai matchup. I hate to say it. I don't think you do Redline Azuri. I think you do like all in on the, the 6 effects, and then have a bunch of shreds and stuff like that. I think you have to go more into that aspect of it, the slower version. And I hate to say it, but you just gotta give up the Dromai matchup. I've been signing D-Reacts into Azalea. Brutes is Victor. 3 Sync, 2 Staunch, and I've found Victor to be pretty solid into them with that lead Victor into being open to more success. I mean, if you're using that many sideboard slots, the problem is like Starstruck and Crippling into Azalea. And Starstruck, obviously. Well, Starstruck is good because you can block with it and another card into the Brutes and then send a 2 for 8, right? With an on hit. Whereas Victor has to do other things to make his Seismics / Vigor, whatever, that are a little bit more conditional. So, Staunch is fine. Like, I agree. But, like, Sink Below is not the answer to Azalea. Nobody's ever beat Azalea because they had a Sink Below. Staunch is pretty good. That's probably won a couple games. But Sink Below is not enough. If Sink Below is all it took, the deck wouldn't be good. All right. Well, I'm going to work on closing this out. But like I said, if you have any questions, throw them in chat right now. I'd love to get to them real quick. But just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I hope everybody got some value, whether you asked a question or you didn't. Like I said, the whole reason for this stream was to just get everybody ready for RTN season, what to expect. If you're having problems with KO, try fatiguing them. It's a viable option if the opponent doesn't exactly know how to combat that strategy. But just little nuggets like that. I hope everybody got something. I really, really do. So 5/Katsu got full send, no D-Rack versus Azalea. I think I would go full send and maybe have like a reinforce. I would rather play reinforce the line over a D-React because remorseless can affect it, and you can always get 2 cards out of your hand no matter what, and then do a 2-card play like CNC or E-Strike. I hope top 4 this weekend with 5 and place him in your A tier. I hope you do too. I don't think he answers very specific questions, and maybe it's good for if you have a lot of brutes, I think he's fine. I think he's a fine pick. Balance of Justice needed to fatigue KO. Yeah, I hate to say it. It's 100% necessary. And another thing is, I don't it's not the optimum strategy against KO if they're good. I don't want to give anybody misinformation. If I sat down, I would never sit down in front of a player and say, I'm trying to fatigue this KO. But you can play this mid-rangey game plan and at some point in the match come to the realization that it is a possibility. And as the game progresses, you need to continually evaluate whether that is a win condition or not, is the most important thing. I think Balance of Justice is just so good in the meta right now. If you do not have it in your sideboard, I highly, highly suggest that try to reevaluate 1 card in the sideboard and make some room for it, because blocking 2 and drawing a card is pretty good value, I heard. Not every matchup. And also, use it the first chance you get. Don't try to get fancy. If they play Blood Rush Bellow, if you haven't blocked with it yet, block with it. And then when they close the chain, pop it and get your card. Preferably you would have blocked with it already, and then just when they play it and draw, boom, you draw your card, determine your blocks, and go from there and get your free value. As Victor, that's been my win con, indicate fatigue them without. Yeah. You don't want to set out to fatigue, but a lot of the times it'll just accidentally happen because they need to effectively make trades with you. So I hope I explained that correctly. Don't just try to fatigue KO. Play a normal game plan, but just always analyze whether that's a possibility. The tier list guys at it again. I know. But this one's different. This one's not power level. This is just like, these are decks that ask questions. These are decks that answer questions. And I think it's better to bring a deck that asks questions into an RTN season where there's not top level players around every single corner, right? I think it's just better to have a linear, powerful game plan. Prism is top tier on power level. However, she's very, very, very difficult to play, which is why I have her in C. And I also have to put it in C tier, so that way when Rhea wins 16 RTNs over the 4 weeks, we can have that meme go again. So I'm more aware of every hero I put in C tier more than any other tier. So if you ever look at my tier list, know that the C tier is always correct for that reason. All right, chat. Thank you again so much for joining me. I hope each and every one of you got at least something out of it, whether you ask a question or not. I really do appreciate all of you being here. If you're in the area, I can't wait to see you at RTN. If not, absolutely best of luck in your RTNs. Get that top 4, get that invite. I tell you what, do me a favor. If you watched this and there's ever a point in your RTN where you're like, man, Nathan said this and it helped me. If that thought ever comes to your mind during the RTN this weekend, post in the comment below. Let me know. Let me know what it was and how it helped. It would mean the world. I really would appreciate it. Can you do a tier list of characters you want in Fortnite? No, I can't, Donkle. No, I can't. Was Fi in C tier when he won Worlds? No, I had him in S tier because I am always right. If you want the proof, it's in Twitter. Go to, what is it? September, November on my Twitter. You'll see the tier list. Boom. Had him in S tier. Always right. I don't make the rules. Just is what it is. But I hope everybody has a lot of fun this weekend. Thank you so much for joining me. Best of luck this weekend, everyone, and take care.